podcast. As always, I'm your host, Mark Shorten, and I can't really say it was a massive week in basketball. There obviously was a trade that went down this morning, but I think a lot of people, like myself, are looking forward to the NFL starting, getting a lot of the drafts out of the way. I'm in both a dynasty and a redraft league, which is definitely taken a lot of my attention, but it's been good fun given I know nothing about it. So that's certainly enjoyable. But basketball wise, Lauri Markkanen, he has been traded this morning. A lot of us did see this coming. We maybe thought it might be a different team or it might be a different situation, but he's off to Cleveland. So he has been part of a three-team trade. So Markkanen is off to Cleveland. That means that Cleveland is sending Larry Nance Jr. to Portland, and Portland is sending Derrick Jones Jr. to Chicago, as well as a bunch of picks across the way as well. So in terms of what that looks like from a fantasy standpoint, I will only say the only time I have ever drafted Lauri Markkanen was last year. I got him in a couple of places and I really hated it. He is not somebody that I necessarily loved having on my team. I thought he was quite unreliable whenever it came to just staying on the court. I don't imagine that's going to change too much in Cleveland. I do think that, they've thrown a bunch of money at him. So I think it's 67 million over 3 years or something like that. And I don't think he's worth that. For one, they're obviously, whenever you get paid, you get played more often than not, especially if you're a young guy, especially if you're in a rebuilding team. So they're going to play him. It's just going to be curious to see what that does to Mobley and to Jarrett Allen. They've kind of thrown money at Allen to keep him, and obviously they've drafted Mobley, who you'd think is going to be the front and the face of that organization moving forward. So it will be interesting to see what that is. I don't think I'm going to be touching Lauri Markkanen going into this year. Unless he drops dramatically, I just don't trust his production. I don't trust him to stay on the court. Probably more importantly, he's a threes, points, and rebound sort of guy. You can get those late in your draft. You can get a poor man's Markkanen would be somebody like a Davis Bertans that you could get really late in your draft, potentially undrafted. A Kyle Kuzma could fill that void this year. I saw a lot of Patrick Williams putting up threes for Chicago. So there is going to be a lot of those guys towards the end of your draft. So I wouldn't be reaching for Markkanen because you just don't know what his role is going to look like. The other pieces, so Nance Jr., probably my favorite out of all of this. I think he goes to a Portland side where he's going to be starting. You're going to see Nurk obviously at the center slot. You're going to see Covington probably shift down into more of a three position, and then you're going to see Nance, who is going to start at the four, probably play some small ball five as well. They don't have much in the way of big men or decent big men on their roster. We know that Nance only needs to get 20, 25, 30 is elite, but 20 to 25 minutes to perform. He's a really good long defender. He's going to get you steals, so he's definitely somebody that I really like in this new situation. It's just a little less crowded and cloudy than what it was in Cleveland. So Nance Jr. at Portland I really like. And Derrick Jones Jr., you can just leave him be. He was just a throw-in piece, I think, to make money work. And it's just, I wouldn't even bother with him. Keep an eye on him because we know that he's long. He defends really well. It obviously didn't work out in Portland, but he showed some really good signs whenever he was in Miami. So there is the potential there, but I don't think that I'll be taking too much of him. James Harden. So actually, probably should start off by talking about what's on the podcast today. So podcast following on from last week where we did the point guard tiers. We're now going to shift and do the shooting guard tiers. Probably spoiled who I'm going to be talking about, number one. But what I'm looking at here is players who are listed as shooting guard primarily. So last week I spoke about certain players who are point guard, shooting guard. In this list is probably going to be people who are, again, point guard, shooting guard, or shooting guard, small forward. But in the interest of streamlining it and the interest of not repeating players that I've already mentioned, I wanted to stick with players who are shooting guard first, potentially shooting guard only, but that gets rid of quite a lot of people who are dual position. The first one, he is dual position. He's probably the only person that's going to be on here. He's James Harden. James Harden, for me, is the standout player for fantasy in the Brooklyn Nets team. I know a lot of people are going to say Kevin Durant. I just think that Harden offers you a lot more whenever it comes to being elite in categories. KD is an elite basketballer, but James Harden just does it across the board. You're going to get dominant free throw. You're going to get dominant threes. Gets really good boards for a guard. In his new home, you're going to see him regularly tick over double-digit assists. He clogs the lane really well and gets steals. He's a surprisingly good post defender, so he's going to get you blocks, and obviously he's going to get you some elite points. Probably mentioned this last week as well. What you're going to lose from James Harden being in Brooklyn is he's going to be sharing the ball a lot more, so you're going to get assists, but you're also going to lose out when it comes to points. There is new rules in the NBA coming in where if you initiate the offense whenever you're driving to the lane or if you're putting up a shot, which James Harden loves to do both, they're going to award an offensive foul as opposed to give you shots because it's an ugly look for the NBA. We all know that. So that's something that is going to hurt him, as well as potentially sitting and potentially resting. So he is in a side where he doesn't necessarily, and they don't need him to play every single game. They don't need any of their big three to play every single game. They're going to get wins whenever they've just got the two of them. I mean, if they're playing somebody like Sacramento, they could probably sit all three and still get the win by 20 or 30 points anyway. That's how good their roster is. Also, that's how bad Sacramento are. But James Harden, for me, is the number one shooting guard going into this year. Tier 2, we've got 4 names here. Bradley Beal, Jimmy Butler, Zach Lavine, and Paul George. So with these guys, what I am looking at is how many categories are they going to dominate for you, and are they going to win you a week? So I really like Bradley Beal as almost a tier 1 type guy, almost a top 10 type guy. He is going to completely run that offense. I don't care what other pieces they brought in. Yeah, they got Dinwiddie. Yeah, they got Kuzma. Yeah, they've still got Bertans. They've still got Thomas Bryant. They've still got Rui Hachimura. Those players are they're complementary pieces for somebody like Bradley Beal. He's going to run the offense. He's going to have the ball in his hand. He puts up shots. He gets steals. I don't know if he did or he was top 2 in points per game for the NBA last year. So Bradley Beal is definitely somebody that I absolutely love and will be getting as many shares as I can. There is a lot of trade rumors around about him as well, him being unhappy, understandably so. He's an elite player in the peak period of his career. He wants to win a championship. He's not going to do it in Washington with their current pieces. So even if he gets moved, he's still going to be great. So no issues there with Bradley Beal. Jimmy Butler is another player who I really, really like. I know that they've brought in Kyle Lowry. I still think that Jimmy Butler is going to initiate a lot of the offense. He's dominant whenever it comes to 2 percentages. He steals the ball like nobody else in the league. He doesn't put up threes. He assists. He gets boards. He gets points. Pretty good whenever it comes to turnovers as well. So Jimmy Butler is somebody who I like Beal. I'd be looking at towards the back end of the first round. So if you're in a slightly deeper league, you're looking at both of those guys in the 11, 12 to 15 type range. And I don't really see any issues with that. If either of those guys are the first 2 players on your list or first player on your list, you're still going to have a pretty good year. Zach Lavine has been awesome. I passed up an opportunity to trade Booker for him last year with a bit of pride from my side, and I also haven't really rated Zach Lavine from a stability standpoint. He was really injured to start his career, but he has gone from strength to strength, and he is the guy in Chicago. I don't really care that they've brought DeRozan in. I don't think that DeRozan is all that much top whenever it comes to being able to help a team win. And I think that that's going to be the case this year. I think Lonzo's only going to help Lavine. I think Lavine's going to have a really good year. Maybe his assist drop a little bit. I think he's going to get more steals. I think he's going to get more threes and he's going to get more points as well. So really like Zach Lavine. And finally in this tier 2, we've got Paul George. God knows what's happening with Kawhi Leonard. And that's pretty much the reason why Paul George is a tier 2 guy, potentially bordering on a tier 1 guy. He has shown throughout his career that he can be great, but he's also shown times in his career where he's really struggled. And I think that some of that is harsh because where he has struggled whenever he has been the guy and it's been crunch time and it's been clutch and he's not performed in really important games. He's doing it for the entire season. He's going to be fine. He's going to find his rhythm. There's also a lot of pressure that's not on him because they're not expecting him to be able to carry the team to a top seed, which is why I really like him. We don't know when Kawhi's back. I personally don't think he's going to be back all year, which is why I really like Paul George. Points, threes. He's going to get a lot of assists because he's going to be running that offense. He always gets really good boards. I don't know if I've mentioned, but he's really good in steals. Doesn't get too much in the way of blocks. He's going to get you points. The biggest issue is going to be his health. I don't know if they being the Clips, if they're struggling, whether they just pack it in for the year and they sit him. But from how it looks right now, I really like Paul George as a late teens sort of pick, early 20s. Then I personally think it drops down quite a bit whenever it comes to the next level. And there's going to be players who I haven't mentioned, who I'm about to mention, who I am probably going to cop a bit of hate from, which is fine. I'm only giving my opinion piece based on the 10 years that I've been doing fantasy, based on the scarcity of stats, based on the potential to get similar stats later down in your draft as well. Because whenever you get your pick, you want to maximize that pick. And if there is a person there who's going to be getting you a couple of steals as opposed to getting a couple of threes, you're not going to get those steals later in your draft. Hence the reason why I've got your Bookers and your Georges and your Butlers so high up. Tier 3, we've got Khris Middleton, we've got Jaylen Brown, and we've got Donovan Mitchell. We've also got Devin Booker in there as well. He was potentially going to be one further down, but that was mainly because of a bit of rage from my side. He's a tier 3 type shooting guard this year. So Khris Middleton, coming off a really good year. He was a top 40-ish type guy. That was purely based on 2 really good percentages and across the board stats. So get you a couple of threes. It's going to get you 4.5, 5 boards. He's going to get 4.5, 5 dimes. Going to get you a steal. Going to get you half a block, and he's going to get you 20 points. Looks after the ball really well. He's only going at 2 turnovers per game, which if you're in a 9 category league is super important. And I think every year he goes underrated. He's boring. He's in a team that is surrounded by Giannis, and Giannis is the guy. But Middleton, you can't really go wrong with him if you're starting, say, your third round. In a third round, in a late, early fourth, in a more shallow league, so we're talking late 30s, early 40s. I think Middleton is somebody who is probably right at the top of that bracket, and he's not going to disappoint you all year. Jaylen Brown, another really good guy who is in probably a better position than Khris Middleton because the pieces around him just don't exist. So you got Jason Tatum, and then that's it. The durability standpoint for Brown has been a bit of a question, but I'm willing to take the risk on that if I can get him close to 50. He is somebody who is going to get you really good points. He's going to get you threes. He's been a little shaky at the line, but I'm okay with that. He doesn't get there all that often. Really good from the field, steals really well, and he's going to get you a couple of assists. Now, I think that this year is going to be a year for Jason Tatum to take that next level. I thought it was going to be last year. I think it's going to be this year. I think Marcus Smart, the way that they're speaking about him, he is going to be running the offense quite a bit, which means that Brown could be in a position where he's going to catch and shoot quite a bit. I'm okay with that. He's a good catch and shoot guy. He also defends really well. He's one of the premium 3-and-D guys in the league, and he's more than that, to be fair. So I really like him in the third round. Oh, sorry, in this third tier, I really like him at the 45-50 range whenever it comes to your draft. Now, the next two guys I've spoken about quite a bit. I think I spoke about them in the point guard tiering, but it's Donovan Mitchell and Devin Booker. Now, I think that both of those guys are really shallow whenever it comes to what they produce. They are very heavily dependent on points and on decent percentages. Both are really good from the line. Booker's really good from the field. Donovan Mitchell's okay from the field, but if they're not getting their assists, then they're really, really struggling. So that's where a lot of their value comes from. Mitchell is going to be playing alongside Mike Conley more again this year. Mike Conley is coming back in. He's coming back in healthy. Devin Booker, he's playing alongside Chris Paul again. Yes, both of those guys are going to learn a lot from these veteran point guards, but I don't necessarily think that helps their fantasy this year. If they're not a top, if they're not getting above 4.5, 5 assists per game, then I think that their value is really going to struggle because, like I said before, you can get shooters, people who put up points and threes down the draft order. So that's why those guys are in the tier 3. And to be fair, they're in the bottom of the tier 3. Yes, I'll draft those guys. Yes, I'm not opposed to getting them because, yeah, they're going to be better than most. But I just think that if you're going to be spending a third round on these sort of people, you want to make sure they do a little bit more than just score. Tier 4, CJ McCollum, DeMar DeRozan, Caris Levert. Now, I'm not going to go too much into DeMar DeRozan. Obviously, I just spoke about him. CJ McCollum, I think that he is one of the most overdrafted and overrated players in fantasy. There is a couple of guys who I think you can get later in your draft that they don't have the same sort of upside and they're not going to have those same sort of big games that CJ McCollum has. But McCollum is very dependent on threes. This year we saw him put up more threes than ever before. He makes them, which is fine. He doesn't get to the line. So, yeah, he has good percentage, but he only gets there a couple of times a game. He's going to get you 20, 22, 23 points a game. Doesn't really steal, get you 4 assists, doesn't really get any boards, doesn't get a block. I think you can get people later in your draft, and I'll have more about that in the draft guide, but there is not that much I love about CJ McCollum. I think he's a bit of a boring player, and I think he's a bit overdrafted, but he is still the tier 4 here is a level above the tier 5 that I've got coming up. DeMar DeRozan, as I mentioned, I'm not going to talk too much about him because I don't think that he's going to have a good year. Maybe that's why I should speak about him. I think that the ball's going to be out of his hands, so he's not going to be able to create. With the ball not in his hands and not being able to take people off the dribble, he is going to struggle to get to the line. Doesn't put up too many threes, doesn't put up any threes, doesn't steal, doesn't block. And, I mean, rebounds are fine, except he's certainly not elite in that category. So that leaves him purely as a couple of assists, getting to the line, which with his usage down, he's going to suffer there a bit. 50% from the field, great. It's going to be on lower volume, and he's still going to be a 20-point a game sort of guy, except he's not somebody that I want where he will be going. So that's fine. Caris Levert, he's probably the guy I have above all of these, or above both of those players, even though he could potentially be coming off the bench. So Caris Levert is a baller. We know that. He defends well. He runs the offense really well. He puts up threes, does it with good efficiency. Not as great from the line, but I think that this year, with a new coach, they're going to give him a lot more opportunity, and they're going to need to rely on him to win some games because it's not going to be Miles Turner. It's not going to be Malcolm Brogdon. Sabonis is fine, except he's not an amazing shot from deep. And if he's going to be facilitating the offense in the post, then Caris Levert's going to be knocking down some shots. So I really like Caris Levert this year. For a drafting standpoint, McCollum and DeRozan, for me, I mean, both of those guys would be over 70, which means I'm not going to get him, which is fine. Caris Levert, I'd say, be around the 50 point. I really like him. Tier 5, we've got Bogdanovic. So that's of the Bogdanovic variety. We've got Anthony Edwards, we've got Norman Powell, we've got Evan Fournier. Bogdanovic is he's either going to annihilate his ADP or he's going to tank his ADP. Reason being is he had a good month. He had a couple of good months and a couple of bad months with Atlanta. They obviously didn't necessarily want him to start off with, but he was also a massive partner in them making the conference finals. I think that he is going to be a mini version of Trey. He is going to get you 4 or 5 assists. He's going to get you upper teen points. He's going to put up a lot of threes. He steals pretty well, and he's going to put it all up with some pretty garbage percentages. But, I mean, where you're going to get him is going to be 70, 80. So I think that the upside's there. I think the upside's there more than I do for a DeMar DeRozan. Could be a hot take, but I think the upside's certainly there. Anthony Edwards, I think he's going to have a big year. Minnesota kind of need him to. He's going to absolutely tank your percentages, but he's going to put up some big numbers whenever it comes to threes, boards, and points. He is bouncy. He's exciting. I think that he's going to be overdrafted from a name value and from an excitement point of view, but I think he's in for a big year this year. Norman Powell, I love Norman Powell. I think he's that poorer version of CJ McCollum that I mentioned, where CJ is going to go in the 40s. You're going to be able to get Powell in the 70s and 80s. And percentages, going to be pretty much the same. Threes, going to be pretty much the same. Boards, same. Assists, McCollum's going to have more than Powell, probably by 2 or 3 per game. Defensive stats, I'd say that Powell's got McCollum covered. Blocks, both relevant, and points, you're probably going to be giving away 5 or 6 there. McCollum's going to have 22, 23. Powell's going to be having probably 16, 17. So given that what there is 3 assists and 7 points difference between those two, I'd be taking the lower guy on that, and then being able to take a person in the 40s and 50s who is going to get you a much more higher ceiling and much more higher value. Finally, for this tier, Evan Fournier, he is the other player that I think is a really good comparison piece for CJ McCollum. He is obviously in a new home being New York. He is probably, Kemba's there, and Julius Randle's there as well. I think Fournier is probably going to be the second distributor and probably second or third on the pecking order when it comes to the offense. But I still think he can get 20 points a game. He can. In Orlando, he had Vooch there. I swear there was somebody else as well, and he was down the pecking order there, and he was still able to. Probably even Oladipo. He was down the pecking order there, and he was still able to get 20 points a game, 4 assists a game, a couple of threes, decent percentages, all the things that McCollum is going to get you as a 4th rounder. Fournier is going to get you probably close to 100 because people are going to forget about him. He had a bad year last year, had a bad year the year before that, but whenever he was in Orlando prior, dominated. So definitely somebody that I like. Again, he's a little bit boring, but I think he has the opportunity to absolutely annihilate his ADP. Tier 6, Andrew Wiggins, Buddy Hield, Klay Thompson, Green, that'd be the Houston variety, and Victor Oladipo. This doesn't really excite me all that much. Andrew Wiggins had a good year last year. He's a decent fantasy defender. I don't really love him as a defender in real life. He tanks whenever it comes to free throw. He's not great at field goal. He's taught himself how to shoot threes, but yeah, I don't love him, especially with Klay back. Um, yeah, he's a plus 100 right for me. Buddy Hield, similar to CJ McCollum, there are players that you can get later in your draft that you don't have to sacrifice an early pick for. Buddy Hield is prime example of that. He's going to go late this year because he had a really, really bad year last year. There is also a lot more depth in Sacramento. There's a trade rumors about him as well, but I I had him a lot last year, and I tried to trade him a lot last year. Nobody wanted to buy it, and for good reason. There is a lot of players you can get off the waivers who pretty much do the exact same thing that Buddy Hield does. Shoot threes. That's it. Um, yeah, not too much I have to say about him. I I would probably almost leave him on the waiver wire. Somebody else will take him. I think that even he's at that point where you're not going to take him with your first 7 picks. You're you would take him obviously with your last picks because the upside's there. But with the 8, 9, 10 range, that's where I like to go for a younger player with a bit more of a higher ceiling, somebody who could win you a league at 90, 100. There's a lot of players that you draft that you don't finish the season with, whether that's through injury, whether that's because you took a punch and they didn't get there. No reason why Buddy Hield's not going to have another bad year. And even if he has a good year, he's still not worth much more than a top 60. So I'm not big on Buddy this year. Same as Klay. I think they've both got similar upside and similar downside. Both shoot threes, both get buckets, both whenever they're on have really good shooting percentages. But other than that, they're not really the sort of guys that I want. Jalen Green, he looked really, really, really good in Summer League. I think that he's going to have a really good year. Like rookies are going to have, they're going to have their off nights where percentages are absolutely going to kill you. They'll have nights where they go 4 for 20, which really hurt. And that's part of being a guard in the NBA and part of being a rookie guard in the NBA. So the upside is certainly there. Out of all of these 5 players, he's the one that I'm probably biggest on. The opportunity is going to be there. They're going to kind of just give him the offense to go along with Christian Wood and see how they go. So I really like him. Victor Oladipo, 1 year minimum contract. I'm pretty sure it was minimum or pretty damn close to minimum. Kyle Lowry, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Victor Oladipo. I mean, that team is absolutely stacked if we're talking 2018, but we're not. And Depot is injury prone. He's going to be down the pecking order. He will have big nights. He will get overdrafted, but don't be that person. Don't be the person to reach him above 100 or under 100, I should say. And number 7, tier number 7. So there's a couple of little sneaky picks in here. So Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Malik Beasley, RJ Barrett, Duncan Robinson, Gary Trent Jr., Joe Ingles, Jordan Clarkson, Kevin Huerter, Dylan Brooks, and Lou Dort. Now, I'm not going to go through each of these players because the podcast's probably gone on a little bit long anyway. The ones I am going to hit on. So, Alexander Walker. I've spoken about him before. He has a really good opportunity to be the secondary guard, potentially even the playmaking guard in OKC. No, not OKC. New Orleans. So they're lean in this position. So he is going to have every opportunity to run the offense. They in minutes last year and with opportunity, he really did perform. It's a matter of whether or not he can do that from a consistency standpoint. I don't really care. I trust that he is going to have bad nights. I trust that he's going to have good nights, but overall it's going to work out well. And they are kind of rebuilding, but they want to make sure that they've got the pieces around Zion and around Brandon Ingram moving forward. So I really, really like Nickeil Alexander-Walker as a late round guy, potentially even a last round guy with massive sleeper upside. Then the other ones that I like, Gary Trent Jr. Gary Trent Jr., I think he's going to have a really, really nice year. He is potentially the secondary playmaker in Toronto. I'm okay with that. Malachi Flynn has the potential to start there, but I think Gary Trent Jr., even if he comes off the bench or even if he's at small forward in a very small lineup, I think that he has the opportunity to be more than just points. So throughout his career so far, he's been a 3-point specialist. Obviously, he's going to get you some points. I think he can be more than that, especially given that they are really thin. So I like Gary Trent Jr. as a late round guy as well. And then finally, the other one that I like here is, and I hate to say it, is Dillon Brooks. Dillon Brooks he always goes last round in every draft that I'm in, regardless of the depth, which is a bit odd. I have seen enough that I would take a punt on him late round again. You need to be prepared that he's going to tank your field goal. So you either need to be stacked with bigs that you can compensate for that, or you just need to punt that category and take him. He's going to get you some assists. He's going to get you threes. He's going to get you some steals as well, which is really valuable for a late round guy. So he's probably the last one there. I like Dort, but I'm not 100% sold on his fantasy, on his stats moving forward. He's a great defender in real life. Don't know if he is going to be able to translate that through to fantasy. And he's a really shaky shooter. Other than that, the rest of the guys there are pretty much shooters and are pretty much scorers, not too much outside of that. So take what you will. Otherwise, pretty excited to talk about the fact that I am going to be doing a bit of a collaboration over the next couple of days to bring you guys a top 20 list with the guys from the Casual Fan Experience. If you're not following those guys on Spotify or on Apple, you should. They're really good. 3 Aussie blokes just talking about sport, about basketball, and just saying what everyone else is feeling. So you should get on those guys. They're really lovely. So looking forward to seeing what differences we've got there. I'm not going to show each other what we've got until we record. Otherwise, join me on Instagram. Join me on TikTok. I've just started on TikTok, and it's a little awkward, but that's okay. Join us on Twitter. Join us on Spotify. Join us on Apple, and obviously on YouTube if you're watching right now. And until next time, don't forget to rate and subscribe.